But remember, this is not just a story. This is our future. Just kidding, no it's not. Okay, so Detroit Become Human is a very interesting case, at least for me, because I love it in some places and in some I just can't stand it. And simply put, this will be a video about that. But first, a couple of things, as always. Well, spoilers. Also, I will mostly keep it to the good path that leads to the good ending, because while this is a game where you can choose your own adventure, the ending that you're supposed to aim for is the good one, so I have to assume that for the developers this is the definitive version of the story. Also, tropes are not an inherently bad thing. Just because something was done a millionth time doesn't mean that you can do it a millionth and once this time. Just stating the fact that something is a trope is saying nothing about its quality. I say this because Detroit Become Human is full of tropes. Just because I say something is doesn't mean it's inherently bad. So, I will go over the three main protagonists' stories and dissect them from what I think is best to what I think is worst. And then examine the question, what is going on with this public in Detroit Become Human? Because for me this is a confusing case and a case that is not done very well. So let's do it! Can we all just agree that this game should have been Connor's story and nothing else? So Connor's story is mostly him doing investigations with Hank, and in this case it's a pretty typical buddy cop story. And while the investigations themselves have a lot of the problems that the general world building has and that run through the entire story, but Hank and Connor as characters are what really makes this the best of the three stories. Their chemistry is just so good and it's so entertaining to watch, and it makes totally sense that law-abiding android Connor with his lack of brain-to-mouth filter is rubbing up against rough, I'm too old for this shit Hank. Also, what makes Connor special is that out of all three, he's the only one that embodies the title, becoming human. Getting human emotions is usually depicted as you breaking a wall in your mind, which as an image is confusing in itself, because it kind of makes you believe that androids' ability to act human is somehow trapped and that they have to break out of it, and that conflicts with the notion that they first have to develop it. Also, in this interpretation, it really only works for Kara, because she goes from emotionless android, boom, human. But Marcus, for example, was kind of human to begin with. He didn't really change his attitude. Him breaking the wall only meant that he wasn't following Carl's orders anymore. And Connor's really the only one where you can see a development from an android state to a human state. When he's finally at a point where he breaks his inner wall, it really doesn't mean anything, because we see it develop long before that. And this is a good thing, because we want to see development. We want to see development in a character, and we want to see development in his relationships with people around him. And this is what you have with Connor's storyline. So let's move on with the next one, which is Kara's. And Kara's storyline is kind of meh. So Marcus. Okay, no, let's stay with Kara for a while. I just don't have really much to say to her, because it's not bad per se, but there's also not much there to begin with. She is there to take care of Alice, which in itself is fine. However, I don't think these two were very well-defined characters. I have a problem with Alice in that she has only one character trait, which is child, nothing more. I have a feeling that this actually happens a lot in stories where children are not the main protagonists, that whenever there is a child character, he only gets the personality child, and they call it a day. And I have the feeling that's it with Alice. And in return, Kara gets the personality trait, there to protect Alice, and that's it. So this is why my interest in them ends pretty quickly. It's very obvious that Alice is just a MacGuffin for the story to use as a way of making the audience care for her just because she's a helpless child. And while we're on the subject, can I just say that I hate this kind of stuff? If you're trying to squeeze emotions out of your audience, that you're making your means to do it so painfully obvious. I can forgive a story a lot, imperfections, but that kind of storytelling is something that actually makes me mad. I think the best example I can think of in this game is towards the end, if you are trying to cross the river, I think, and Alice dies, there is a scene where Alice is carried out of the river and the music swells and there are helicopter lights and there's a scream and a wide shot. It's so hilarious! In that sort of scenes, I feel like if David Cage is sitting on my shoulder, screaming into my ear, "Cry! Look how sad this is! Why aren't you crying? Stop shouting at me. I want to be manipulated in a subtle way." But you know what I actually find sad? If you really suck at playing Connor, you kill him all the time and he always comes back. This is something that genuinely depresses me. Is it him that always comes back, or is it just a copy? Did you form your connection with someone who was still dead, or someone that came back? Did your sorrow about his death mean anything if he's just able to come back again? If an android's death is so meaningless, then does his life mean anything? Yeah, and that interesting bit is also in Connor's storyline, so let's move on. Oh, and also there's the Alice twist. Well, do I even need to explain why this is the stupidest thing that ever stupid? Maybe briefly. 1, logically it makes no sense, yet you want to cook for a robot, to bathe a robot. B, it's emotionally meaningless because why even would an android like Kara care if Alice is an android or not? The worst one of 3, which incidentally is also the main one. Let's go to Marcus. So story-wise, Marcus is Neo. No, really. He is violently pulled out of his normal life, goes to Zion, speaks with the Oracle, and gets himself a Trinity. And he frees his people from humans, not from machines. So he's reverse Neo. So the main reason why Marcus's storyline is the worst is because he has this whole social struggle going on. This game is not really good depicting social struggle. For more information on why that is, you should watch a video by Mother's Basement, which is good. Do that. The main problem with this, I feel, are basically 2 things. First, the story tries to tie every plot point regarding that subject to something that we as humans would historically recognize, which is just another part of really trying to manipulate your audience. But it does that while sacrificing the logic of its own world building. Second, it has a very black and white attempt of portraying humans and androids, because humans, with a few exceptions, are always morally wrong, and androids, without exception, are always right and good. So with that in mind, here are a few ideas which could have made this whole thing maybe a little interesting. And you don't have to agree with me, they're not the newest things ever, but as I said, just because it's been done before doesn't mean you cannot do it in an interesting way. So, an interracial human-android relationship. Because in a story like that, why won't you do that? Well, you won't do it if your Detroit become human. Or if you're taking a few pages from Matrix anyway, take another one and make a cipher. Someone who has human emotions but really wants to go back, because as the state of the world is now, he thinks it was easier the way he was and just wants to go back being emotionless, and therefore he betrays androids. Or someone who's just really loyal to his human employer like Marcus was. Or just have an android that betrays them. Just have an android that is evil. But this was not possible because this game omitted all gray areas.